first marathon was run by one man in 490 BC. He made history. Today, the New York City Marathon has 18,000 runners. They make television. During the race, these runners will become part of an international event. Television has created huge live happenings seen worldwide. This marathon will flash by satellite as far as Korea and Iceland. 3,000 miles away in London, the marathon is the key foreign item of Britain's 5-hour live Saturday program, World of Sport.
We set out with thousands of aspiring runners in the biggest mass race of all, the New York City Marathon. A grueling test of strength and determination through the 5 boroughs of the Big Apple for the joggers and the top contenders alike. As in the past, this year there are runners from all 50 states in the US, but also from 60 other countries. So that's the size and the drama of the New York City Marathon.
There is the defending champion, heavy favorite in this race, number 2, wearing the all-black of his native New Zealand.
St. Peter's Square in Rome. Thousands have gathered in the Vatican to see Pope John Paul celebrate Mass. But they're only a tiny fraction of his total congregation. Outside broadcast cameras cover the service live for millions more viewers in Italy and throughout the world. The transmission of real live public events like this made television a new and powerful force in communication. It alone could show the viewer what happens as it happens while he sat in his own home.
Television. That's the one thing that is strictly unique to television, is that ability to go there at the time it's happening. The satellite has given us that capability around the world now, whether it's a tragedy or whether it's a pageantry, whether it's a scheduled event or an unexpected one. That is what we're about.
If it's live, then that is really the best of television, isn't it? If you're there, if cameras are there on the spot, then is television being used to perfection.
That's it. That's the half volley through mid-arm for 4. The back goes in the air. The England players come out to applaud what really has got to be a moment here of cricket history. 100 hundreds and the place to get it in the middle of a test match against Australia on his home ground at Headingley.
In Britain, the networks devote vast amounts of television time to sport. The BBC alone produces 1,500 hours of sport a year, twice as much as light entertainment, 3 times more than news or drama. When the world watches television, what it watches most of all is sport, any sport. In Japan, the biggest audience is for the traditional and spectacular sport of sumo wrestling. 2 powerful men, each weighing as much as 25 stone, grapple in one of the most explosive combat sports. Sumo is a throwback to samurai Japan, with its pageantry, medieval dress, religious rites, and individual feats of strength. In modern-day electronic Japan, the past is still important. Sumo is televised for up to 3 hours a day, 90 days a year, and attracts 20 million viewers, even though an average fight only lasts 30 seconds. The British, however, prefer something a little less violent. So tranquil and addictive is snooker that it's been called the new opium of the masses. 20 years ago, it was dying in shabby backstreet halls. But television saw snooker as ideal box. It gave the game glamour and a gladiatorial air. It is now the biggest viewing sport in Britain.
3 on the cloud, please.
It's always been very popular, but of course television brought the game in front of a public that perhaps normally would have had no connection with the game whatsoever. It does become compulsive viewing, I think. In fact, it's been said that about 55% of the viewers these days are women.
May the 5th, 1980. Into the hypnotic trance of millions of viewers glued to the World Snooker Championships, television suddenly thrust a remarkable live event. The SAS assault on the Iranian embassy in London. Thousands rang in to complain at this intrusion into their favorite game. Live sport, for some, it seems, is more exciting than live news. In America, what turns on the viewer is their own amazing version of football.
Was hit down by Anthony Washington. Really hit down. Olkowitz.
It is a violent game, and I think we are a violent society. Although we try to pretend that we're very civilized, we have a very violent society. It is also, in many respects, it's a game of ingenuity. It is a game of dominance. It is a game of strength, and it is a game of grace, skill, and beauty.
The climax of the American football season, the Super Bowl, has been made a national ritual by television. It's watched by half the nation, 100 million people, the largest audience for any TV show of any type in America.
Looks like Anthony Washington said something to him after he hit him. And Cliff is reacting to that.
And now here's Olkowitz in the middle of it.
Don't mess with middle linebackers, Cliff, by the name of Olkowitz.
Television coverage has also given the Super Bowl political overtones.
It's been great. You proved tonight that a good defense can also be a pretty good offense.
Well, thank you, Mr. President.
Any president with half America watching wants himself to be seen as an ally of the winning coach.
It probably started with President Nixon, who cared perhaps more about football strategy than he did about foreign policy, although that's debatable. But now it has gotten to the point where no president probably can afford not to call the winning coach, because if he does, then he's not a real man, he's not a football fan, it'll probably lose him votes.
Again, my congratulations to you. God bless all of you. And there isn't anything that I could say that would make you any happier than you all must be.
Sport is the most successful programming on American television. It has all of the elements of drama, of storytelling in many cases, and it taps into a very ancient and primitive hunger and appetite on the part of the audience.
It allows people to be ringside or at the edge of a pitch or in the stands for a big athletics meeting without actually going there.
Coe hits the front, looks around, and he's got Ovett on his shoulder. He's got 2 meters on him, and Ovett's going to have to sprint all the way here. Coe's away at the front, and it looks as if Coe's going to do it. Coe is going to win the 1,500 meters, and Ovett's going to get only a bronze medal. A fantastic run by Coe. He's done it. He's got the gold in second place.
Well, it's a perfect form of television programming when you think about it. It involves a lot of action, suspense. It's live, takes place in real time. It's unscripted. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. It involves, at its best, a lot of human interest. Sports is entertainment. Sports is not the holy grail. It is not doing brain surgery. It is not wiping out hunger in India. It is flat out entertainment.
You get to see everything from an angle. There's the cameras. You can see everything you want. Best seat. And it's more comfortable. You can be in your house. You can be in a bar. Wherever you want.
There's some days when it's when you see a game on TV, particularly like this, when it's rainy and miserable there, and in a nice pub having a beer, I'd rather watch it on TV.
50 years ago, viewers, too, found sport on television irresistible. Many bought their first set just to watch the thrills of the big sporting occasions.
We had to sit in complete darkness. Incidentally, I was courting my present wife at that time, which was no disadvantage. And one used to ask in the Friends, whenever there was a big OB on, sit around this very small screen, and of course in black and white.
Hutton gets his 300 and looks like going on to 1,000.
But in those early days, television technology was limited. Often only 1 or 2 cameras were used. And in sports like football and baseball, the players seemed like ants. Television did best when the action was on a smaller scale. Wrestling and boxing were ideal sports to cover, but the overriding attraction of sport on television was simple.
Sports weren't very expensive in those days, and in those early days we had to be quite careful how we spent our money. We weren't overburdened with money at that time. And so we did a lot of sports, and they were popular, and we did it quite well.
I could go to a ballpark, make one setup. Now, may have taken us 4 or 5 hours to make the setup, but I'd have 3 hours of programmatic material. And so we did baseball, football, hockey, tennis, you name it.
Most sports were a little frightened. They thought we'd take away from the attendance, which of course perhaps in the long run we did. But Wimbledon was a classic place because they could fit it 10 times over. So they allowed us to select our own camera positions, and I selected them just behind the royal box, and I was amused to see the same camera positions are still being used over 40 years later.
But television engineering was forcing the pace, extending television beyond the old familiar national frontiers. The outside broadcast began to flex its muscle in August 1950.
This your first sight of France by direct vision on this lovely summer night. This is the famous group, the Burghers of Calais. Rodin's lovely statue, carved in 1895.
Richard Dimbleby welcomed British viewers to these historic, if wavy, pictures from Calais, the first outside broadcast from abroad. A small step of just 95 miles, but the beginnings of live international television.
May we have the Brooklyn Bridge, please? Coming right up, Mr. Morrow.
In America, too, a major leap in technology. The first remarkable broadcast of See It Now in November 1951 captured 2 scenes 3,000 miles apart.
There she is. Brooklyn Bridge. Thank you very much, Eddie Scott. Hold it, please, will you? May we have the San Francisco Bay Bridge, please? Okay. Now, San Francisco, could you use what you call, I think, a zoom-R lens and close in on the bridge a little?
Roger. And it occurred to us that for the first time, mankind, could see the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean side by side. No one had ever been able to do that before.
May we have the New York skyline, please, Eddie Scott?
The idea is that we are shrinking the Earth in those first 3 minutes of a new television series. It was startling. People still talk about it. The words were right, the pictures were right, and the technology was exploding right in front of your eyes, and you said, this is television. What a promise.
The size of the television audience, too, began to expand. In Britain, the pageantry of a major royal event was the catalyst. The 1953 coronation of Elizabeth II, covered by 22 cameras, was the biggest broadcasting operation ever mounted up to that time. But it was no easy victory for television. There was still a deep suspicion of the power of the television camera, a suspicion still held today. Cameras are not allowed in the House of Commons.
Everyone in the establishment was trying to prevent us from televising the actual coronation and the altar. But they felt, well, it was an invasion of privilege to allow live television. They did think that we might sort of tackle it a bit like a
a Sunday newspaper. Super.
The moment of the Queen's crowning is come.
But television won the day. The whole ceremony was shown to the viewer at home, and abroad the coronation was relayed live into Europe, the first truly international outside broadcast. In Japan, as in Britain, a major royal event was to set off the television boom.
We had live coverage of the imperial wedding of Crown Prince with a commoner, which was a big story at that time. Everybody rushed to the TV set to watch the big ceremony. The amount of TV set sold was tremendous. That gave really an incentive to buy a TV set.
Cameras weren't allowed to film the actual wedding, but coverage of the procession doubled the number of sets from 2 to 4 million. Japan's economic miracle had taken off.
The Duke of Cornwall sees his mother crowned.
In Britain, this was the day television came of age. For the first time, the television audience outnumbered the radio audience. 20 million watched it, only 12 million heard it. The crowning of the Queen became, through television, a warm slice of national nostalgia, fondly recalled a quarter of a century later in television's most famous soap opera.
The 2nd of June, 1953. That was a day to remember. Well, were you there? I mean, did you go down special? It wasn't necessary, dear, no. Jack and I had the first television in this area. Oh. And, of course, it was much better at home because the weather was dreadful, simply dreadful. It must have been very colourful all the same. It was, dear, it was.
But you only had black and white in them days.
Some of us have the ability to colour events with our imaginations.
Never before have so many seen the crowning of the sovereign, or so many shared in her dedication in this Abbey church.
The great success of the coronation was to force a change in the BBC's attitude to television.
And they started to give us more money. We became more adventurous. We were able to pay more for facilities in outside broadcast events and sport. And I think from then on, television roared ahead.
And Oxford are definitely sinking, I think. We come over onto the Oxford crew. Oxford are getting lower and lower in the water, and they definitely are sinking. Oxford has sunk.
Good evening. Welcome to Sports View. Tonight's program ranges from racing to boxing, from football to skating.
Sports View, the first successful sports magazine program in Britain. An early scoop was Bannister's epic achievement in athletics.
With 250 yards to go, 25-year-old Bannister took the lead with an amazing burst of speed. He went on to achieve the world record of a mile in under 4 minutes, sought after by athletes for over 40 years. His time was 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds.
Abroad, too, outside broadcasts achieved major breakthroughs. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the world's first spaceman. The BBC were in Moscow to cover a more mundane story, the annual May Day parade. And a television scoop fell into their laps.
And it was a historic event, of course, to be there at the time when Gagarin returned to Moscow from the first space flight to be greeted by Khrushchev at the airport. The Gagarin space flight really was the first live broadcast from the Soviet Union.
But the space age, the age of world television, arrived in 1962 with the launching of Telstar, the first transatlantic communications satellite.
Good evening, Europe. We had intended to take you at this time to Washington, where the President's weekly news conference is about to begin. But because of early acquisition at Andover, we got the Telstar circuit early, and the President has not yet started. So Suppose we take you to a baseball game in Chicago instead, and perhaps it's only fitting that the sporting event, one of civilization's earliest ceremonials, be the first special event to be televised across the sea.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just been informed that this baseball game is being seen in Europe right now over the Telstar satellite. Let's give all the baseball fans in Europe a big hello from Chicago.
It's hard to imagine that there were any baseball fans in Europe then, or many who had ever seen the game. But that greeting from Chicago heralded a new age. Telstar had brought about, for good or ill, the age of the international audience. Television could now span the world.
Half of the world should be pretty like me. I'm a champ.
February 1964. The duel between the silent, fearsome world champion Sonny Liston and Cassius Clay, the Louisville Lips, was the first live transatlantic transmission of the World Heavyweight Championship. It was 3 in the morning when the satellite brought the fight to Europe, but 7 million people in Britain alone stayed up for the event. And those millions of viewers from California to Germany saw Cassius Clay dance his way to become not only the champion, but also the first of the new race of television superstars.
Shoulder went out. He could not continue. Winner by a TKO in the 7th round, Cassius Clay.
The satellite transformed television's impact on the world. Live pictures could now be relayed to and from almost any part of the globe immediately and realistically. The 60s and 70s saw the growth of larger and larger audiences. And what people watched most of all were the great ceremonial outside broadcasts of the day. Five continuous hours of the state funeral of Sir Winston Churchill in 1965 were channeled by Eurovision and flashed by Telstar. 350 million viewers across the world, an audience greater than ever before, joined in the solemnity.
And on the wharf there, in their own salute, London's dockets are lowering their cranes.
Daniel, leave that 1 foot up there and both hands down about the 4th rung up. There you go.
And the audience grew. 1/5 of the world's population, an astonishing 720 million people, watched television make its first landing on the moon in 1969 and span 250,000 miles.
That was such a historic moment. It was like the turning of a page of history. The whole of history was going to be changed from now on.
And the audience grew yet again for terrestrial pageantry. 40 cameras covered the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer. 74 countries settled themselves in front of their sets. 750 million people watched. And the Enterprise beguiled William Shatner 6,000 miles away in Los Angeles.
We all gathered early in the morning, and my friends made a total English breakfast with Bangor sausages and scones. I guess that's tea time, but it didn't matter. It was anything English that we could think of. And we watched this marvelous thing on television, which gave me a great deal of joy. It was very moving and romantic and like a fairy tale, and we felt here everything that you felt there.
I would say that was one of the best happy, good news thing. It was not meant to be anything more than a great day. Kids must have thought there's a real prince there, a real fairy tale, in a real golden coach, bells, music, singing, guardsmen in red coats, punks with red hairdos not killing each other. It was a great day. I suppose that was one of the great times for television. It went around the world.
Wilt thou love him, comfort him, honor and keep him in sickness and in health? And forsaking all other, keep thee only unto him, so long as ye both shall live.
I will.
But the Olympic Games is now the laurel on television's brow. A quarter of the world's population, 1,000 million people, watched the closing ceremony of the Moscow Games in 1980. No area of television was to benefit more from the satellite than sport. Major events from anywhere in the world could now be beamed straight into the home. And one sport in particular became the global game. The international religion, soccer. What unites the world isn't Dallas, but watching football.
If you've got a major event as a live event, for example, the Cup final, then you get a massive audience for that. If you're at Wembley, the height of the excitement with a full house, 90,000 people there, and the climax of the Cup season, then, you know, what better can you have than that?
Alverston's made a tremendous break through the middle for Wilkins. Oh, a brilliant goal by Ray Wilkins!
Here's the Wilkins.
Even greater than the audience for the Olympic Games is that for the World Cup. The contest is now transmitted to 120 countries, and 10,000 million people, twice the population of the Earth, will watch at some time during the course of the contest.
And a catch-off, and a ginger, release and catch moves.
The satellite transformed sport and made it internationally popular. Unlike drama, comedy, or news, sport needs no translation or interpretation.
There are three languages, to me, that are totally universal. Sport, music, and ballet. I mean, it's incredible physical ability tied to music. Those are the things that don't require any language other than the eye and the emotion.
Television now has the power to arouse appetites where none exist. Torville and Dean were watched by millions in the West and created new patterns in the East.
There are many types of sport that have been especially helped by television. For instance, we have no ice dancing in East Germany, but the viewers like it enormously. Your ice dancers, Torville and Dean, have gained unheard of popularity, and so has ice dancing itself, because of these television broadcasts.
The interchange works both ways. Television brought the Russian gymnast Olga Korbut to world fame and changed one part of Western sport.
Before 1972, women's gymnastics was a sport that very few Americans knew anything about or cared about. And then on the scene came Olga Korbut, and with the focus put on it by American television, suddenly women's gymnastics took on a whole new patina of appreciation. And really right now, women's gymnastics is a very major sport here in this country.
technological advances, too, made by television, gave viewers around the world an insight hitherto unknown to man. Slow motion and instant replay meant that time could be slowed, frozen, and recalled. Millions of viewers were now free to turn an almost godlike judgment to sport. Television gave viewers something much better than a ringside seat. It now gave them the privilege of seeing more than the actual spectator at the event. And the man who launched the new technique was Roone Arledge, head of ABC Sport in America.
Congratulations to the American. It gives you the best seat in the house. And if you want to do something for people to make it a greater experience to watch something on television than in person, you give them things that they can't see in person. And to do that, a lot of times you have to get very tight.
Now it was sport, seen not simply as sport, but also as entertainment. Straightforward coverage was dead. Arledge choreographed the moves using 20 cameras where 2 had been used before. His motto was blunt: get close, get personal. Handheld cameras captured close-ups of players and the coaches. And for Arledge, a vital ingredient was to focus on the pageantry of sport.
He turned the cameras around back into the stands so you could see the rapt expressions of the spectators, the cheerleaders. So it became a form of storytelling. He created a sense that sporting events were not merely distant statistical struggles of small figures on a gridiron, but they were sort of epic, mythic battles that came right out of folklore.
Allen over the top for the first down. Boy, does he accelerate.
Viewers, too, were bombarded with more visual data and detailed explanations than any spectator at the game could ever see.
Watch here. You see what he's doing? He's keying right here on Olkowitz. Now watch. Olkowitz will start out here. Allen starts here. Sees Olkowitz over here. He just stops and runs right back here.
Marcus Allen. Raiders in the end zone. Touchdown, Marcus.
The sport of American football exploded. It became a huge audience grabber. Peak time, top entertainment. Advertisers rushed to get aboard the success story. Today, a 30-second commercial during the Super Bowl final cost $500,000.
American advertisers are very willing to pay large sums of money to be identified with sporting events. Car dealers and those types of people feel a great sort of almost primitive pride of being allied with the National Football League. So it does make money.
In 1982, the 3 networks paid $2 billion for the TV rights to American football. The days of cheap sport were over. It had become big business. In Britain, too, money poured into sport from big companies eager to push their names in front of large TV audiences. It seems that Liverpool don't play Everton anymore. It's Hafnia versus Crown Paints. And biggest spenders of all are the cigarette companies. Banned from advertising directly on television, they led the way in sponsoring sporting events. The viewers' choice of sports were completely changed. Fringe events like show jumping were heavily screened, and most astonishing of all, darts. Once a public house pastime, television sponsorship turned it into a huge money-spinning game.
Looks like he's coming for 3 17s. Yes. Treble 18, his next target. Yes, he wants 2 18s for £100,000.
£100,000 for 30 seconds work. Even snooker can't beat that, though it tries. Once there had been no sponsorship and meager prize money. Then television turned it into a mass audience game.
On 3. Come to 1. On 1.
It's brought an influx of money, which is always an important thing. Because the game is attractive to the viewers, this has attracted sponsors. In fact, they're queuing up to sponsor snooker tournaments these days.
Thanks to television, world champion Steve Davis is now a millionaire, the highest paid sportsman in Britain. As television has brought neglected sports out of the closet, so too has it played showman to some older and more sedate pursuits. Cricket was once a quiet, sleepy game, often played on empty grounds with little money in it. It was transformed by television into the razzmatazz of Kerry Packer's World Series, coloured shirts, white balls and all. Nothing is sacred anymore, even scoring a duck. Act of television and money was on the Olympic Games. The ideal that sport should be played for fun was overturned. Yet, back in 1948, £1,000 bought the complete TV rights. The London Olympics were covered by just 2 camera units. There were as many people crowded into Wembley Stadium as there were TV sets in Britain at the time, a mere 80,000. By 1968, those innocent days were over. The Mexico Olympics became the games of political and social protest. But the games carried on, only to erupt into further controversy. As the 2 black American sprinters, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, mounted the winner's rostrum, they stood with heads bowed and fists clenched, the Black Power salute.
People have latched onto the Olympics to make some statement because of television and the world watching. And a huge audience, much bigger than for any political conference, because sport is so universal.
First politics, then terror. At Munich in 1972, the Olympic Stadium became a theater of death. 11 of the Israeli team were taken hostage and later killed in a shootout between the German police and a Palestinian guerrilla group. But even this was not to stop the Olympic spectacle.
We cannot allow a handful of terrorists to destroy this nucleus of international cooperation and goodwill. We have the games must go on.
A more cynical view was that the games went on because too much money was at stake. The sale of TV rights escalated from $13.5 million at Munich to $25 million at Montreal in 1976. After fierce competition among the American networks, the rights for Moscow in 1980 trebled to $87 million. Even the Russians, in their turn, succumbed to Olympic hysteria. The closing ceremony, covered by 44 cameras, was the most bizarre, extravagant spectacle ever mounted in the Soviet Union. What the East can do, the West must better.
The next segment, I don't think you're going to believe, but it involves no less than 84 grand pianos. It's a piece that reflects the vintage years of Hollywood.
The opening of the Los Angeles Games did not reflect Hollywood, it surpassed it. Television had decreed that 1984 should be bigger and better and bolder than ever before, that the Games were not supreme athletic achievement, but a showcase. Sport had lost out to showbiz.
sport is made for television and vice versa. It's raised the standard everywhere. It's provided vast amounts of entertainment. It is just in the one field of the Olympic Games where the Olympics have got so big and the television operation has got so huge that the two combined are killing the Olympic Games.
We would not be able to mount the games without television input. That's a major source of income. Well, I would say without television funding, we wouldn't have a Los Angeles Olympic Games, because so much of our budget depends on the income of the television rights sold to television companies throughout the world.
The TV rights for the Los Angeles Games cost ABC $225 million, 3 times more than in Moscow. And to recoup that investment, the market had to be saturated. For 2.5 weeks, from 8 in the morning till 1 o'clock at night, 188 hours of sport filled the television screen.
Covering more and more and yet more, and hyping it and building it up, the event becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's hard to imagine that it can get much bigger than it is, you know. And yet it almost has to, because if it should disappoint at some point, and the ratings suddenly evaporate for the thing, you have a crisis of a kind.
That crisis may come in the very near future. The TV rights for the 1988 Games in Seoul may go for as much as $1,000 million. Even the American network may balk at that price.
I do think that the financial and economic structure of all sports, the Olympics probably the most dramatic example, have been affected by television far more than they should, because if television money was all of a sudden extracted from sports around the world, the whole edifice would collapse.
2,500 million people watched the 1984 Games. In 35 years, television has developed from an infant stumbling across the English Channel to a colossus that bestrides the earth. These games represented the ultimate world television spectacle. For the moment, at least.
Next online, a movie true to its name, but with a definite twist in The Wedding, starring Carol Burnett, Desi Arnaz Jr. and Mia Farrow. Then join us for more highlights of the day's play of the second Test cricket.